His grades were public decor. Mine were a private matter. I mastered the quiet celebration early in life. I learned that unacknowledged success remains achievement. The morning my work surfaced where my parents could not ignore it, I made sure to be absent for the reaction. My name is Jessica. I am 34 years old. I am a commercial underwriter for a regional bank. I sit at my desk on the 9th floor of a glass building in downtown Grand Rapids. The April sky outside my window is the color of wet cement. A new digital file hits my underwriting queue. It requires immediate review. It is a request for a commercial surety bond. The principal coverage amount is $2 million. The applicant is an unlisted logistics firm operating out of the Metro Detroit area. I open the executive summary. The managing director profile loads on my monitor. The name Lucas stares back at me. My 37-year-old brother is asking my employer to guarantee a high-risk commercial loan. A sour taste rises in the back of my throat. I open the attached appendices. Underwriting protocol requires strict verification of all executive educational credentials. A supplementary document renders on the screen. It is a color scan of a university diploma. It is the exact same degree our 62-year-old mother Helen framed in the hallway of her Macomb County home. I lean closer to the monitor. The embossed university seal is slightly pixelated. The font alignment on the graduation date is crooked. The year listed is a decade ago. Lucas failed his junior year. He never walked across a stage. My brother submitted forged academic credentials to a federally insured financial institution. Before I tell you how I navigated a 90-day federal compliance audit and dismantled the golden child of my family, please take a second to subscribe to Maya Tells Stories. Tell me in the comments what your current age is and what state you are watching from right now. I would love to know if you have ever discovered an elaborate lie hiding in plain sight within your own bloodline. My fingers hover over the mechanical keyboard. The plastic keys feel like ice against my skin. I do not immediately flag the fraudulent file. I scroll down to the financial disclosures. Lucas claims his firm holds exclusive freight contracts with regional auto parts suppliers. I look at the revenue projections. The math is pristine. Real business ledgers always have friction. Late invoices happen. Freight gets damaged in transit. Fuel costs fluctuate. These ledgers are synthetic. He is inflating his gross revenue through shell entities. He is committing bank fraud. Our 64-year-old father, Thomas, lost his auto manufacturing pension 15 years ago during the economic crash. The trauma of that financial ruin paralyzed him. He viewed the traditional success of my brother as the only life raft for our social standing. My parents built a shrine to the potential of their son. They ignored my corporate promotions to protect his fragile ego. Now his ego is sitting in my corporate queue, requesting $2 million of insured capital. The rules of my commercial license are rigid. I cannot simply hit the reject button and walk away. Corporate compliance requires a formal verification trail. If I decline the bond without submitting the required evidence, the Internal Review Board will flag my decision. They will cite a familial conflict of interest and route the file to another underwriter. A different underwriter might miss the pixelated seal. A different underwriter might approve the fraud. I have to document the forgery myself. I reach for my coffee mug. My hand is shaking. I click on the collateral tab to see what physical assets Lucas pledged to secure the initial fees for this bond application. The page loads line by line. I read the parcel identification number listed under the bridge loan section. The air leaves my lungs. The room spins. The numbers on my monitor align into a familiar sequence. The parcel identification digits listed under the collateral section do not belong to a generic commercial warehouse. I know the zoning codes for this specific zip code by heart. The property pledged to secure the initial premium for this commercial bond is a residential address. The digits map directly to a split-level house with pale blue vinyl siding on a quiet cul-de-sac in Macomb County. It is the house where I learned to make myself invisible. My vision blurs at the edges. A cold knot tightens at the base of my throat. I push my chair back from the desk. The ergonomic wheels glide silently over the low-pile corporate carpet. I need physical distance from the glowing screen. Lucas did not just submit a fabricated university degree to trick a federal bank. He secured a private bridge loan from a predatory hard money lender to cover the exorbitant underwriting fees for this fraudulent application. Hard money lenders do not care about business plans or synthetic revenue ledgers. They care about tangible assets. They require hard collateral. My brother convinced our parents to sign away the deed to their paid-off home to fund his digital mirage. I look at the digital signature of my father on the collateral pledge. Thomas signed his name in rigid cursive. He handed over his only remaining financial shelter to a son who lies for a living. I trace the history of this exact moment back through 3 decades of suffocating favoritism. The geography of my childhood was mapped entirely around the fragile ego of my older brother. We grew up in the shadow of the Detroit auto industry. It was a culture that valued loud, traditional male success over quiet female competence. Helen and Thomas treated the white enamel door of our kitchen refrigerator like a sacred museum dedicated exclusively to Lucas. Every mediocre achievement earned a premium spot at eye level. A participation ribbon from a summer track league hung next to a C+ essay on the Industrial Revolution. Helen used heavy plastic clips to ensure the drafts of his book reports never slipped. The refrigerator door was a visual testament to his presumed greatness. I remember standing in the kitchen doorway holding my own perfect report cards. I would watch my mother carefully arrange a photograph of Lucas wearing a baseball uniform. I recognized early on that there was 0 space left for me on that enamel surface. My victories were considered administrative footnotes. His failures were treated as temporary setbacks on the road to inevitable wealth. The disparity crystallized during my junior year of high school. I spent 6 months studying advanced calculus and probability theorems. I entered a statewide mathematics decathlon and secured first place in my division. The award was a heavy wooden plaque with a polished brass plate bearing my name. I brought it home on a humid Tuesday afternoon. I walked into the living room feeling a rare flicker of genuine pride. Thomas was sitting in his worn fabric recliner. He was drinking a domestic beer and watching a local sports broadcast. Lucas was sitting on the sofa, staring at the floor. My brother was in the middle of a terrible varsity baseball slump. He had struck out in 3 consecutive games. The atmosphere in the house was tense and solemn. The entire family was mourning his athletic decline. I placed the heavy brass plaque on the dining table. The metal caught the light from the overhead fixture. I told my father I won the state championship. Thomas did not stand up. He did not smile. He looked at the brass plate and let out a long, weary sigh. He glanced over at Lucas, who was sulking on the upholstery. Thomas looked back at me with an expression of tired annoyance. He asked me to take the award into my bedroom. He told me to keep it out of sight. He said my brother was having a very rough season, and my academic trophy would only make him feel worse about his batting average. He asked me not to rub my success in the face of my sibling. A sharp, painful pressure bloomed behind my ribs. I did not argue. I did not demand recognition. I simply picked up the heavy wood and carried it down the hallway. I slid the brass plaque under my bed next to a box of winter sweaters. I lay on my mattress and stared at the ceiling. That was the exact hour I learned to bury my own excellence. I realized my achievements were viewed as active threats to the peace of my household. Unacknowledged success had to be enough. I stopped sharing my victories entirely. I graduated from university with high honors in finance and risk management. I did not invite my family to the honors banquet. I secured a lucrative underwriting career in Grand Rapids right out of college. I spent my 20s climbing the corporate ladder. I analyzed market trends and evaluated risk profiles for multi-million-dollar developments. I built a formidable reputation in the financial sector. Helen and Thomas never understood my profession. They never tried to understand it. Helen told her church friends that her daughter did paperwork at a bank. She reduced my complex analytical career to the image of a clerk stamping forms. It was easier for her to diminish my reality than to admit I had surpassed her golden child. Lucas spent his 20s bouncing between catastrophic failures. He launched a custom apparel company that went bankrupt in 6 months. He tried to start a consulting firm with 0 actual clients. He burned through his personal savings and racked up credit card debt. Through every failure, Helen and Thomas adjusted the narrative. They refused to call him unemployed. They called him a visionary entrepreneur. They claimed he was simply ahead of his time and waiting for the market to catch up to his genius. They constructed an elaborate fantasy world to protect him from the consequences of his own incompetence. Now that fantasy world is sitting on my underwriting desk. The synthetic revenue ledgers and the forged university diploma are the final desperate acts of a man who cannot survive in reality. Lucas built a fake logistics company because he knew his parents would praise the illusion. I look back at the collateral tab on my monitor. The screen illuminates the sterile confines of my office. The situation is no longer a mere corporate compliance issue. It is a ticking bomb planted directly under the foundation of my family. To secure this bond application, Lucas needed liquid cash for the initial underwriting fees. He circumvented traditional banking channels and went to a private equity lender. The private lender placed a hard lien on the Macomb County house. If I approve this bond, I become an active participant in federal wire fraud. I will lose my underwriting license and face a grand jury indictment. If I flag the forged diploma and decline the bond, the logistics company collapses today. The commercial loan falls through. The private lender will instantly trigger the default clause on the bridge loan. The hard money predators will foreclose on the split-level house with the pale blue siding. They will evict Helen and Thomas before the end of the month. I am holding the detonator. My brother handed me the power to destroy the only financial safety net our parents possess. The review board requires my preliminary assessment by the end of the business week. I cannot hide behind administrative delays. I have to verify the documents. My lungs feel tight. The recycled air in the office is suddenly inadequate. I cannot type a formal rejection letter from the safety of a glass building in Grand Rapids. I cannot initiate the ruin of my father through a digital portal. I need to see the house. I need to look the patriarch in the eye and force him to look at the monster he created. I close the digital file and lock my workstation. I grab my coat from the back of the door. The drive to Macomb County takes 2 hours, and I have a family to dismantle. His grades were public decor. Mine were a private matter. I mastered the quiet celebration early in life. I learned that unacknowledged success remains achievement. The morning my work surfaced where my parents could not ignore it, I made sure to be absent for the reaction. My name is Jessica. I am 34 years old. I am a commercial underwriter for a regional bank. I sit at my desk on the 9th floor of a glass building in downtown Grand Rapids. The April sky outside my window is the color of wet cement. A new digital file hits my underwriting queue. It requires immediate review. It is a request for a commercial surety bond. The principal coverage amount is $2 million. The applicant is an unlisted logistics firm operating out of the Metro Detroit area. I open the executive summary. The managing director profile loads on my monitor. The name Lucas stares back at me. My 37-year-old brother is asking my employer to guarantee a high-risk commercial loan. A sour taste rises in the back of my throat. I open the attached appendices. Underwriting protocol requires strict verification of all executive educational credentials. A supplementary document renders on the screen. It is a color scan of a university diploma. It is the exact same degree our 62-year-old mother Helen framed in the hallway of her Macomb County home. I lean closer to the monitor. The embossed university seal is slightly pixelated. The font alignment on the graduation date is crooked. The year listed is a decade ago. Lucas failed his junior year. He never walked across a stage. My brother submitted forged academic credentials to a federally insured financial institution. Before I tell you how I navigated a 90-day federal compliance audit and dismantled the golden child of my family, please take a second to subscribe to Maya Tells Stories. Tell me in the comments what your current age is and what state you are watching from right now. I would love to know if you have ever discovered an elaborate lie hiding in plain sight within your own bloodline. My fingers hover over the mechanical keyboard. The plastic keys feel like ice against my skin. I do not immediately flag the fraudulent file. I scroll down to the financial disclosures. Lucas claims his firm holds exclusive freight contracts with regional auto parts suppliers. I look at the revenue projections. The math is pristine. Real business ledgers always have friction. Late invoices happen. Freight gets damaged in transit. Fuel costs fluctuate. These ledgers are synthetic. He is inflating his gross revenue through shell entities. He is committing bank fraud. Our 64-year-old father, Thomas, lost his auto manufacturing pension 15 years ago during the economic crash. The trauma of that financial ruin paralyzed him. He viewed the traditional success of my brother as the only life raft for our social standing. My parents built a shrine to the potential of their son. They ignored my corporate promotions to protect his fragile ego. Now his ego is sitting in my corporate queue, requesting $2 million of insured capital. The rules of my commercial license are rigid. I cannot simply hit the reject button and walk away. Corporate compliance requires a formal verification trail. If I decline the bond without submitting the required evidence, the Internal Review Board will flag my decision. They will cite a familial conflict of interest and route the file to another underwriter. A different underwriter might miss the pixelated seal. A different underwriter might approve the fraud. I have to document the forgery myself. I reach for my coffee mug. My hand is shaking. I click on the Collateral tab to see what physical assets Lucas pledged to secure the initial fees for this bond application. The page loads line by line. I read the parcel identification number listed under the bridge loan section. The air leaves my lungs. The room spins. The numbers on my monitor align into a familiar sequence. The parcel identification digits listed under the Collateral section do not belong to a generic commercial warehouse. I know the zoning codes for this specific zip code by heart. The property pledged to secure the initial premium for this commercial bond is a residential address. The digits map directly to a split-level house with pale blue vinyl siding on a quiet cul-de-sac in Macomb County. It is the house where I learned to make myself invisible. My vision blurs at the edges. A cold knot tightens at the base of my throat. I push my chair back from the desk. The ergonomic wheels glide silently over the low-pile corporate carpet. I need physical distance from the glowing screen. Lucas did not just submit a fabricated university degree to trick a federal bank. He secured a private bridge loan from a predatory hard money lender to cover the exorbitant underwriting fees for this fraudulent application. Hard money lenders do not care about business plans or synthetic revenue ledgers. They care about tangible assets. They require hard collateral. My brother convinced our parents to sign away the deed to their paid-off home to fund his digital mirage. I look at the digital signature of my father on the collateral pledge. Thomas signed his name in rigid cursive. He handed over his only remaining financial shelter to a son who lies for a living. I trace the history of this exact moment back through 3 decades of suffocating favoritism. The geography of my childhood was mapped entirely around the fragile ego of my older brother. We grew up in the shadow of the Detroit auto industry. It was a culture that valued loud, traditional male success over quiet female competence. Helen and Thomas treated the white enamel door of our kitchen refrigerator like a sacred museum dedicated exclusively to Lucas. Every mediocre achievement earned a premium spot at eye level. A participation ribbon from a summer track league hung next to a C-plus essay on the Industrial Revolution. Helen used heavy plastic clips to ensure the drafts of his book reports never slipped. The refrigerator door was a visual testament to his presumed greatness. I remember standing in the kitchen doorway holding my own perfect report cards. I would watch my mother carefully arrange a photograph of Lucas wearing a baseball uniform. I recognized early on that there was zero space left for me on that enamel surface. My victories were considered administrative footnotes. His failures were treated as temporary setbacks on the road to inevitable wealth. The disparity crystallized during my junior year of high school. I spent 6 months studying advanced calculus and probability theorems. I entered a statewide mathematics decathlon and secured first place in my division. The award was a heavy wooden plaque with a polished brass plate bearing my name. I brought it home on a humid Tuesday afternoon. I walked into the living room feeling a rare flicker of genuine pride. Thomas was sitting in his worn fabric recliner. He was drinking a domestic beer and watching a local sports broadcast. Lucas was sitting on the sofa staring at the floor. My brother was in the middle of a terrible varsity baseball slump. He had struck out in 3 consecutive games. The atmosphere in the house was tense and solemn. The entire family was mourning his athletic decline. I placed the heavy brass plaque on the dining table. The metal caught the light from the overhead fixture. I told my father I won the state championship. Thomas did not stand up. He did not smile. He looked at the brass plate and let out a long, weary sigh. He glanced over at Lucas, who was sulking on the upholstery. Thomas looked back at me with an expression of tired annoyance. He asked me to take the award into my bedroom. He told me to keep it out of sight. He said my brother was having a very rough season, and my academic trophy would only make him feel worse about his batting average. He asked me not to rub my success in the face of my sibling. A sharp, painful pressure bloomed behind my ribs. I did not argue. I did not demand recognition. I simply picked up the heavy wood and carried it down the hallway. I slid the brass plaque under my bed next to a box of winter sweaters. I lay on my mattress and stared at the ceiling. That was the exact hour I learned to bury my own excellence. I realized my achievements were viewed as active threats to the peace of my household. Unacknowledged success had to be enough. I stopped sharing my victories entirely. I graduated from university with high honors in finance and risk management. I did not invite my family to the honors banquet. I secured a lucrative underwriting career in Grand Rapids right out of college. I spent my 20s climbing the corporate ladder. I analyzed market trends and evaluated risk profiles for multi-million-dollar developments. I built a formidable reputation in the financial sector. Helen and Thomas never understood my profession. They never tried to understand it. Helen told her church friends that her daughter did paperwork at a bank. She reduced my complex analytical career to the image of a clerk stamping forms. It was easier for her to diminish my reality than to admit I had surpassed her golden child. Lucas spent his 20s bouncing between catastrophic failures. He launched a custom apparel company that went bankrupt in 6 months. He tried to start a consulting firm with 0 actual clients. He burned through his personal savings and racked up credit card debt. Through every failure, Helen and Thomas adjusted the narrative. They refused to call him unemployed. They called him a visionary entrepreneur. They claimed he was simply ahead of his time and waiting for the market to catch up to his genius. They constructed an elaborate fantasy world to protect him from the consequences of his own incompetence. Now that fantasy world is sitting on my underwriting desk. The synthetic revenue ledgers and the forged university diploma are the final desperate acts of a man who cannot survive in reality. Lucas built a fake logistics company because he knew his parents would praise the illusion. I look back at the collateral tab on my monitor. The screen illuminates the sterile confines of my office. The situation is no longer a mere corporate compliance issue. It is a ticking bomb planted directly under the foundation of my family. To secure this bond application, Lucas needed liquid cash for the initial underwriting fees. He circumvented traditional banking channels and went to a private equity lender. The private lender placed a hard lien on the Macomb County house. If I approve this bond, I become an active participant in federal wire fraud. I will lose my underwriting license and face a grand jury indictment. If I flag the forged diploma and decline the bond, the logistics company collapses today. The commercial loan falls through. The private lender will instantly trigger the default clause on the bridge loan. The hard money predators will foreclose on the split-level house with the pale blue siding. They will evict Helen and Thomas before the end of the month. I am holding the detonator. My brother handed me the power to destroy the only financial safety net our parents possess. The review board requires my preliminary assessment by the end of the business week. I cannot hide behind administrative delays. I have to verify the documents. My lungs feel tight. The recycled air in the office is suddenly inadequate. I cannot type a formal rejection letter from the safety of a glass building in Grand Rapids. I cannot initiate the ruin of my father through a digital portal. I need to see the house. I need to look the patriarch in the eye and force him to look at the monster he created. I close the digital file and lock my workstation. I grab my coat from the back of the door. The drive to Macomb County takes 2 hours, and I have a family to dismantle. I sit in the driver's seat of my sedan. The concrete walls of the downtown parking structure amplify my breathing. The engine remains off. The keys sit untouched in the cup holder. I cannot merge onto the highway and face my father without possessing the complete architecture of the lie. I need the raw data. I reach into my leather bag and pull the laptop back out. I balance the heavy machine on the steering wheel. I activate the cellular hotspot on my phone. The screen illuminates the dark interior of the car. A commercial underwriter evaluates risk by searching for the friction in a business model. Legitimate companies possess rough edges. They have irregular tax filings and fluctuating inventory costs. The file submitted by my brother possesses zero friction. I navigate back into the secure banking portal. I bypass the forged university diploma and dive directly into the operational ledgers. Lucas listed Vanguard Freight as a premier regional logistics provider. He claims his firm holds 3 exclusive transportation contracts with Tier 1 auto parts suppliers. The narrative he presents to the bank is a story of explosive industrial growth. He requests $2 million to purchase a fleet of commercial trucks to meet the alleged demand of his vendors. It is a compelling pitch for a commercial loan. It plays perfectly into the economic revival mythology of the state. I open a new browser tab. I access the Licensing and Regulatory Affairs database for the state of Michigan. Corporate registries are public record, if you know how to query the system. I type the legal name of his primary vendor into the search bar. According to the application, this vendor is a metal stamping plant located in Saginaw. People in this state navigate by holding up their right hand to represent the Lower Peninsula. Saginaw sits right in the inner crook of the thumb. It is a historic manufacturing hub. A legitimate stamping plant operating out of that region would possess a massive industrial footprint. The database retrieves the corporate filing. The address listed for the manufacturing vendor is not an industrial park. It is a retail strip mall on a suburban access road. I run the address through a satellite mapping program. The physical location corresponds to a commercial mailbox rental store. There is no stamping plant. There are no loading docks. The vendor is a phantom. My chest tightens. I copy the name of the second automotive supplier from his ledger. I paste it into the state registry. The server processes the request. The entity is registered to a generic legal agent service in Lansing. It has no physical operational address. It possesses 0 registered employees. I check the third vendor. The system returns a dissolved limited liability company that ceased operations 5 years ago. The disbelief washes over me like a physical wave. I stare at the glowing monitor in the cold car. The vendors do not exist. The freight contracts are pure fiction. Lucas utilized a sophisticated corporate shell structure to create the illusion of a thriving enterprise. He set up empty legal entities and opened basic checking accounts for each one. He is likely moving a small amount of initial seed money in a frantic circle between these ghost companies and Vanguard Freight. The circular movement of capital generates a paper trail of frequent, high-volume transactions. To an automated banking algorithm or a lazy loan officer, it looks like authentic gross revenue. He is creating fake invoices for phantom auto parts and paying himself with his own borrowed money. It is a classic shell game. It is textbook commercial bank fraud. I always knew my brother was a failure. I watched him launch pathetic startups and hide behind the excuses our parents manufactured for him. I thought he was simply incompetent and deeply spoiled. I did not realize he possessed the capacity for federal criminality. The sheer effort required to establish these shell entities and fabricate the corresponding tax documents is staggering. If he had applied this level of meticulous dedication to a legitimate endeavor, he might have actually succeeded. He chose to build a digital mirage instead. The tragic reality of his misplaced intelligence makes my stomach ache. He is a prisoner of the absurd expectations our father placed upon him. Thomas demanded a wealthy son to redeem his lost pension. Lucas lacked the courage to admit he was drowning. He chose to fake an entire corporate empire rather than face the disappointment of the patriarch. A deep professional dread settles into my bones. The parameters of my commercial license offer 0 flexibility. The federal regulations governing federally insured institutions are ruthless. I am a designated gatekeeper. I cannot simply delete the file from my queue. I cannot press the reject button and pretend I never saw the application. Corporate compliance protocols dictate every action I take from this moment forward. If I decline a $2 million surety bond, I must provide a comprehensive analytical justification. If I reject the file without attaching irrefutable external proof of the fraud, the internal review board of the bank will flag my decision. The automated compliance software cross-references the names of all applicants against employee records. The system already knows Lucas is my sibling. If I kill the loan without a flawless paper trail, the review board will accuse me of a familial conflict of interest. They will assume I am acting out of a personal grievance. They will seize the file and reassign it to a neutral senior underwriter. That scenario is a death sentence for my family. A neutral underwriter might glance at the pristine synthetic math and approve the preliminary funding. Dispersing federally insured funds to a fraudulent entity is a catastrophic crime. Or the neutral underwriter might dig into the database just like I did. They would uncover the ghost companies and the strip mall mailboxes. A stranger would not hesitate. A stranger would immediately lock the file and contact the federal authorities. They would trigger an immediate law enforcement raid without giving me a single second to mitigate the collateral damage. I must control the detonation. I have to compile a dossier so flawless and undeniable that the internal review board rejects the bond on strict mathematical grounds. I have to be the one who dismantles the mirage. It is the only way I can manage the timeline of the impending collapse. The pressure of the impending ruin presses against my temples. My hands tremble over the keyboard. I attempt to save the state registry files to a secure, encrypted folder on my hard drive. My fingers slip. I hit the wrong key combination. The browser window closes. A sudden, raw spike of frustration breaks through my clinical exterior. I let out a sharp, ragged sound. I slam my palms against the leather steering wheel. The impact sends a shock of pain up my wrists. I drop my car keys. They slide into the dark, narrow gap between the driver's seat and the center console. I curse the digital file. I curse the shell companies. I curse the refrigerator door that started this entire toxic cascade. I lean my forehead against the cold steering wheel. I allow myself 1 minute of messy, unedited anger. I am furious at Lucas for dragging my pristine career into his criminal orbit. I am furious at Thomas for raising a son who believes reality is optional. I take a slow, deep breath. The scent of old coffee and leather grounds me. I reach down and wedge my hand into the gap to retrieve my keys. The metal scrapes my knuckles. I close the laptop and place it on the passenger seat. The investigative phase is complete. I possess the anatomy of the crime. The vendors are fake. The revenue is synthetic. The university degree is forged. The private bridge loan is tied directly to the paid-off home of my parents. The collision between my professional duty and my familial origin is unavoidable. I insert the key into the ignition. The engine turns over with a steady hum. I pull out of the parking structure and merge onto Interstate 96. The gray sky threatens an early spring rain. I am driving east toward Macomb County. The isolation of my quiet corporate success is over. I am heading directly into the center of the delusion. I have to stand in their kitchen and tell them the golden child is a phantom. I have to tell them they are about to lose their shelter. The highway stretches out before me, leading me back to the house where the lies began. The drive east on Interstate 96 feels like a slow descent into a grave. The gray Michigan sky presses down on the flat landscape. Rain begins to streak across my windshield. I do not turn on the radio. The silence inside my sedan is heavy with the weight of the data I just uncovered. I grip the steering wheel until my knuckles turn white. The synthetic revenue ledgers and the phantom automotive vendors are devastating, but they are entirely abstract. They exist as digital numbers on a corporate server. The true horror of the situation is rooted in physical, concrete reality. I replay the collateral disclosures in my mind. The image of the parcel identification number is burned into my retinas. Underwriting fees for a $2 million commercial surety bond are exorbitant. A legitimate corporation pays these premiums out of operational cash flow. Lucas does not possess legitimate operational cash flow. He operates a mirage. To secure the massive commercial guarantee he needed, a temporary injection of liquid capital. He bypassed the highly regulated federal banks and approached a private equity firm in Detroit. He applied for a high-interest, short-term bridge loan. Private equity lenders operate in the ruthless shadows of the financial sector. They do not care about the long-term viability of a business model. They do not perform deep compliance audits on vendor contracts. They operate on a simple, brutal premise. They issue rapid capital in exchange for ironclad, tangible assets. They require hard collateral that can be seized and liquidated the moment a debtor defaults. Lucas offered them the only asset our family possessed. I remember the day Thomas finally paid off the mortgage. I was 12 years old. He came home from his shift at the auto plant carrying a cheap bottle of champagne. He stood in the kitchen and declared that the split-level house in Macomb County was his fortress. He proclaimed that no matter what happened in the outside world, he owned the roof over our heads. It was the ultimate blue-collar victory. When he lost his manufacturing pension 15 years later, the paid-off house became his only remaining financial anchor. My brother convinced our parents to leverage that exact anchor. Lucas marched into that house and sold them a spectacular lie. He likely sat at the dining room table and spun a narrative of massive regional expansion. He told them Vanguard Freight was on the verge of dominating the auto supply chain. He promised them that the bridge loan was merely a temporary formality. He assured them the $2 million surety bond would clear within 30 days, and he would instantly release the lien on their property. Helen and Thomas believed every single word. They signed the deed to their fortress over to a predatory lender. They willingly chained their survival to the success of his fake logistics company. They did it because they worshiped the myth of his potential. The realization hits me with physical force. The anxiety radiates from my chest down into my hands. If I expose the bond fraud, the logistics company collapses today. The commercial loan application will be permanently flagged by the Federal Compliance Board. The private equity firm monitoring the bridge loan will instantly receive the fraud notification. Hard money lenders do not grant grace periods. They do not negotiate payment plans with fraudulent entities. They trigger the default clause the second the risk profile shifts. If I submit the forged diploma to the review board, I am effectively signing the eviction notice for my parents. The predators will foreclose on the house within 30 days. The sheriff will arrive to change the locks. Helen and Thomas will be thrown out onto the street. Their entire financial existence will be erased because they trusted the golden child. I merge onto Interstate 696 heading toward the eastern suburbs. The traffic slows to a crawl near the major interchanges. The delay amplifies my panic. The compliance clock is ticking. I have exactly 3 weeks to submit my final underwriting recommendation to the executive board. 21 days to navigate a catastrophic collision between federal banking laws and the survival of my family. There is no convenient loophole hidden in the corporate handbook. I cannot manipulate the system to save their home. If I try to bury the forged documents and approve the bond, I cross the line from a passive observer to an active accomplice. Approving a fraudulent loan application constitutes federal wire fraud. I would lose my commercial license. I would face a grand jury indictment and a multi-year prison sentence. I refuse to destroy my own life to protect a lie. I must choose the law. I must protect my license and the integrity of my career. That means I have to pull the trigger on my own family. The sheer magnitude of that responsibility is paralyzing. I am the invisible daughter. I spent my entire life avoiding conflict and burying my achievements to keep the peace. Now the universe demands that I act as the executioner. The rain intensifies. The wiper blades slap rhythmically against the glass. I take the exit for Macomb County. The familiar suburban sprawl replaces the concrete canyons of the highway. I pass the strip malls and the fast food chains that define the geography of my youth. I turn onto the quiet cul-de-sac. The pale blue vinyl siding of my childhood home comes into view. The physical structure looks exactly the same as it did a decade ago. The lawn is perfectly manicured. The garden beds are edged with precision. Helen maintains the exterior of the house with obsessive dedication. She treats the property as a visual representation of her maternal success. She wants the neighbors to view her as the matriarch of a thriving traditional family. I pull my sedan into the driveway. I do not turn off the engine immediately. I stare at the white enamel front door. I can picture the exact layout of the interior. I know the framed fake diplomas hanging in the hallway right past the entryway. I know the refrigerator door is plastered with the meaningless achievements of my brother. I know my father is sitting in his worn recliner, believing his legacy is secure. The anxiety spikes sharply. My breath comes in shallow, rapid gasps. I lean my head back against the seat rest and close my eyes. I try to construct a perfect clinical speech in my mind. I try to organize the financial data into a calm, objective presentation. I want to walk into that house and explain the synthetic ledgers and the predatory bridge loan without raising my voice. I want to act like the stoic commercial underwriter they never respected. But the emotional reality overrides the corporate training. I am terrified. I am furious. I am heartbroken. I cannot process the sheer stupidity of their blind faith. They risked their shelter for a son who could not even pass his junior year of college. I turn the key and kill the engine. The silence in the car is absolute. I grab my leather bag from the passenger seat. I step out into the freezing April rain. The cold water hits my face and snaps me back into the present moment. The time for silent observation has expired. I have to breach the fortress. I have to break the delusion. I walk up the concrete path to the front porch. I do not bother to ring the doorbell. I possess a spare key that I have not used in 3 years. I slide the metal into the lock. The deadbolt clicks. I push the heavy white door open. The familiar scent of roasted chicken and generic floral air freshener washes over me. I step over the threshold. I am standing in the entryway, holding a leather bag filled with digital evidence that will destroy their lives. The illusion of safety inside this house is absolute. I hear the low murmur of the television coming from the living room. I hear the clatter of pots and pans in the kitchen. They have no idea the executioner is standing in their hallway. I take a deep breath and walk toward the noise. The confrontation is unavoidable. The freezing rain transitions abruptly as I cross the county line. The temperature drops. Thick, white flakes begin to fall from the slate sky. Late April lake effect snow is a bitter reality in this part of the state. It coats the Macomb County pavement and buries the suburban driveways under a layer of unseasonal frost. I navigate my sedan through the winding residential streets. My tires crush the fresh powder. I pull into the driveway of my childhood home and shift the car into park. I turn off the ignition and grip the handle of my leather bag. I step out into the freezing air. The snow clings to my dark wool coat. The pale blue vinyl siding of the split-level house looks bleak in the winter storm. I walk up the concrete path to the front porch. The cold wind bites at my cheeks. I push the front door open. The hallway is suffocatingly warm. The scent of roasted chicken and generic floral air freshener hangs heavy in the enclosed space. I walk past the entryway wall. The framed university diploma hangs right where it always does. The pixelated seal on the fake document mocks me. I feel a surge of pure, unfiltered adrenaline. I plan to deliver a pristine presentation. I wanted to lay out the financial data with the surgical detachment of a senior corporate officer. I wanted to be the composed professional they never believed I was. I carry my bag down the short corridor. I walk into the kitchen. The linoleum floor gleams under the harsh fluorescent ceiling lights. Thomas sits at the round oak table. He wears a faded flannel shirt. He is drinking a domestic beer and reading a local sports column. Helen stands by the oven, stirring a simmering pot. It is a portrait of domestic tranquility built directly on top of a financial landmine. The corporate mask evaporates. I unlace my snow-covered winter boots. I do not place them neatly on the designated rubber mat near the door. I drop them directly onto the pristine linoleum. The heavy soles hit the floor with a loud, jarring thud. Melting snow splatters across the tiles. Helen flinches. She drops her wooden spoon. Thomas lowers his newspaper. He looks at the puddle forming around my wet socks and scowls. He opens his mouth to reprimand me for tracking debris into his clean house. I do not let him speak. I reach into my bag. I pull out the printed collateral disclosures. I slam the thick stack of papers onto the oak table. The pages slide across the floral placemats and knock over a plastic salt shaker. I ask him why he signed the deed to his house over to a hard money lender. The words tear out of my throat. I am not speaking in my measured underwriter tone. I am yelling. I ask him why he pledged his only shelter for a ghost company. My voice cracks on the last syllable. It is a harsh, ugly sound. I point a shaking finger at the printed parcel identification number. I ask him how he could be so unbelievably blind. The terror I feel for their survival mutates into raw fury. I kick a wooden kitchen chair. My foot connects hard with the spindle. The chair screeches across the linoleum and slams into the baseboards. The impact sends a sharp jolt of pain up my leg. Hot tears spill down my face. I am crying out of sheer, suffocating frustration. I stand in the center of their kitchen weeping and gasping for air. I lost my composure. I failed to be the stoic professional. I am just a terrified daughter watching her family walk willingly off a cliff. Thomas stands up. The legs of his own chair scrape against the floor. He does not reach out to comfort his crying daughter. His face flushes a dark crimson. The veins in his neck pull tight. He points his index finger right back at me. He yells louder to assert his dominance. He tells me I have no right to barge into his home and throw a tantrum. He grabs the scattered papers from the placemats. He does not read the predatory hard money lender clauses. He defends his son. He tells me Lucas is building a logistics empire. He insists Vanguard Freight is securing exclusive transportation contracts with the biggest automotive suppliers in Saginaw. He parrots the exact lies my brother fed him. He tells me the bridge loan is a standard business maneuver required for rapid corporate scaling. Thomas leans across the oak table. His voice is laced with bitter condescension. He tells me I lack vision. He says my entire career is based on denying opportunities and searching for negative outcomes. He claims underwriters do not build anything. He says people like me sit in glass towers and look for reasons to say no, while real creators do the heavy lifting. He says Lucas possesses the courage to take massive risks. He taps his chest with a heavy hand. He brings up the economic crash. He reminds me that the auto plant stripped away his pension 15 years ago. He worked on the assembly line for 3 decades, and the corporate executives erased his retirement with a single pen stroke. He views traditional financial institutions as the enemy. He looks at my brother as a savior. Lucas is the rogue entrepreneur who is going to beat the corrupt system and restore the wealth of our bloodline. Thomas believes this fake logistics company is his ultimate redemption. He tells me it takes money to make money, and he proudly gave his son the seed capital. I wipe the hot tears from my cheeks with the back of my hand. I try to force the logic through his thick, defensive armor. I tell him the automotive vendors do not exist. I tell him the Saginaw address is a retail mailbox rental store. I explain that Lucas is running a shell game to fake his gross revenue. I tell my father that his son committed federal bank fraud, and the commercial surety bond application is a trap. Thomas shakes his head. He refuses to process the data. He accuses me of manufacturing the evidence out of spite. He claims I am jealous. He says I spent my entire life resenting the ambition of my brother because I am content to stamp forms in a cubicle. His denial is an impenetrable wall. He would rather believe his daughter is a vindictive liar than admit his golden child is a con artist. He needs the lie to survive. He needs to believe his house is an investment in a dynasty rather than a sacrifice to a predator. Helen stands by the stove, gripping a dish towel. She watches her husband and her daughter tear each other apart over the scattered documents. She sees the genuine terror in my red eyes. She sees the unyielding stubbornness in the rigid posture of my father. She knows I do not invent crises. She knows I do not kick furniture or weep without a catastrophic reason. The kitchen feels like a pressurized cabin, ready to burst. I stare at my father, realizing that logic cannot pierce his trauma. I am fighting a ghost. Helen steps away from the stove. She walks toward me. She does not join the screaming match. She places a quiet hand on my trembling shoulder. She gently pulls me away from the oak table. She leads me toward the narrow hallway, leaving Thomas alone with his anger and the truth he refuses to read. Helen pulls me away from the screaming match in the kitchen. Her grip on my forearm is surprisingly strong for a woman who spent her entire life projecting fragility. She leads me into the narrow hallway near the front entrance. The air in this corridor is cooler. The ticking of a brass grandfather clock echoes against the floral wallpaper. My chest is heaving. I am wiping residual tears from my face with the rough wool sleeve of my winter coat. I feel exhausted and raw. I expect her to scold me for disrespecting the patriarch. I expect her to defend the logistics company. She does neither. She reaches out and touches my damp cheek. Her hands smell like dish soap and chopped celery. She looks at me with an expression of profound sorrow. It is not the hot, defensive rage my father just displayed. It is a deep, suffocating resignation. She glances at the framed fake university diploma hanging mere inches from my head. She does not defend the pixelated seal. She knows it is a forgery. She has always known. Helen begins to speak in a hushed, urgent whisper. She does not want Thomas to hear us from the kitchen. She tells me I do not understand the weight of the pedestal. She steps back and crosses her arms over her cardigan. She reveals the origin of her twisted domestic architecture. She tells me about growing up in Escanaba. It is a harsh industrial town located deep in the Upper Peninsula. The winters there are brutal and unforgiving. Her father worked the iron ore docks. He ruled their Yooper household with a rigid adherence to archaic gender roles. She tells me she loved mathematics, just like I do. She wanted to move downstate and study accounting. She brought home college brochures during her senior year of high school. Her father laughed until he choked on his pipe smoke. He told her, "Girls from the UP do not need ledgers." He said they need husbands who can shovel snow and earn a pension. He threw her brochures into the wood-burning stove. He watched her ambition turn to ash. Helen looks into my eyes. The bitter pity washes over me. I see the generational trauma etched into the fine lines around her mouth. She tells me the world destroys ambitious women. She says society punishes girls who try to climb out of their designated boxes. She claims she ignored my perfect report cards on purpose. She says keeping my awards off the refrigerator door was not an insult. She believed it was a shield. She gestures toward the kitchen, where Thomas is still muttering to himself. She tells me to look at what the pressure did to her son. Thomas demanded a savior. He projected all his financial terror onto a teenage boy. Helen watched Lucas buckle under the staggering weight of those expectations. She watched him fail his college courses because the anxiety paralyzed him. She watched him launch doomed startups because he was terrified of looking like a regular working-class citizen in front of his father. Helen claims she kept me invisible so I could breathe. She thought she was giving me the gift of low expectations. She says the world breaks ambitious women, but relentless pressure breaks men. She allowed Lucas to endure the spotlight because he was a boy, and she believed it was his duty. She let me hide in the shadows so I could quietly build my life without the crushing demands of the patriarch. She projects her childhood trauma directly onto my reality. She genuinely thinks her emotional neglect was a brilliant act of maternal salvation. The tragic, twisted logic makes my stomach turn. She enabled a fraud to protect a fragile male ego, and she ignored my excellence to protect me from imaginary iron ore dockworkers. Her protection is toxic. Her trauma created a monster. I pull away from her gentle touch. I lean against the floral wallpaper. I have to break through her psychological armor. I have to make her understand that her suburban philosophy cannot stop a federal indictment. I keep my voice steady and low. I tell her this is no longer a domestic dispute about refrigerator magnets. This is about the Department of Justice. I explain the legal parameters of my commercial license. I tell her about the stringent updates to the Bank Secrecy Act. Since the federal crackdowns on commercial wire fraud starting around 2018, the government no longer treats corporate underwriters as innocent bystanders. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network actively monitors synthetic business entities. When a federally insured bank receives an application containing fabricated vendors and offshore shell companies, the underwriter is legally obligated to act. I look at the framed fake diploma. I tell my mother that if I ignore the pixelated seal, I am committing a felony. If I look the other way and process the surety bond without filing a suspicious activity report, the federal prosecutors will classify me as a co-conspirator. They actively indict financial gatekeepers who aid and abet commercial fraud. I explain that the law requires me to report the shell companies. I tell her the government does not care about Yooper childhoods or maternal shields. They care about wire fraud. Helen stares at me. The legal terminology bounces right off her. She cannot comprehend a world where a federal statute overrides her maternal authority. She reaches out and grabs my hands. Her grip is frantic now. She begs me to just delete the file. She tells me I am smart enough to make the paperwork disappear. She says I can just pretend the digital application never arrived in my corporate queue. She asks me to risk my license, my freedom, and my entire future to buy her golden child a few more months of pretend success. The bitter pity crystallizes into a cold, hard realization. Helen is not just a victim of a patriarchal upbringing. She is an active, willing participant in the destruction of her own family. She would rather see her daughter face a grand jury than watch her son admit he is a failure. She will never understand the math. She will never hold Thomas accountable for his blind greed. The parents are a dead end. They are locked inside a burning house, and they are refusing to open the windows. I pull my hands free from her grasp. I do not waste another breath trying to educate her on federal compliance. I pick up my heavy winter boots from the linoleum floor. I pull them onto my feet and tie the laces with rigid, efficient movements. Helen watches me with wide, terrified eyes. She asks me what I am going to do. She asks if I am going to call the police. I grab my leather bag. I open the heavy front door. The freezing lake-effect snow swirls into the warm hallway. I tell my mother the police are the least of her problems. I step out onto the concrete porch and pull the door shut behind me. The lock engages with a sharp click. I walk down the snow-covered driveway toward my idling sedan. I cannot stop the avalanche from inside that house. I cannot reason with people who worship an illusion. I have to find the architect of the lie. I have to locate the man who forged the documents and signed the bridge loan. I know exactly where my brother hides when the pressure of his fake empire becomes too heavy. He does not go to a corporate office. He goes to a dark corner booth. I start the engine and turn the heater on high. I shift the car into drive. I am heading back toward the city limits. I am going to a specific local tavern on Woodward Avenue. The conflict with the enablers is over. The confrontation with the perpetrator is about to begin. Woodward Avenue cuts through the heart of the Detroit metro area like a concrete spine. It carries the history of automotive glory and subsequent industrial decay. I drive my sedan south, away from the suburban illusion of Macomb County. The sleet turns back into a freezing drizzle. I watch the storefronts transition from pristine shopping plazas to worn industrial lots. I am hunting a ghost. I know the routine of my brother. Whenever the pressure of his fabricated existence mounts, he retreats to a specific dive bar. It is a windowless brick building situated near the old rail yards. The neon sign above the wooden door hums with a broken electrical current. I park my car in the pothole-ridden lot. I turn off the ignition. The cold, damp air bites my neck as I step outside. I pull the heavy door open. The interior smells of stale hops and industrial floor cleaner. The midday crowd is sparse. A few men wearing utility jackets sit near the billiards table. I spot Lucas in a dark corner booth. The sight of him halts my footsteps. My chest hollows out. The golden child is a decaying portrait. He wears a tailored charcoal suit jacket. 6 months ago, the fabric fit him perfectly. Today, it hangs off his frame like a costume draped over a wire hanger. His cheekbones protrude. Dark purple shadows bruise the skin under his eyes. He is 37, but he looks a decade older. The anxiety of maintaining a federal-level con is eating him alive from the inside out. I walk over to the corner booth. I do not announce my presence. I slide into the cracked vinyl seat directly across from him. He looks up. His eyes are bloodshot and unfocused. He does not feign surprise. He does not offer a charismatic greeting. He knows exactly why his underwriting sister tracked him down in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. I open my leather bag. I extract the printed copy of his commercial surety bond application. I pull out the color scan of the university diploma. I place the documents on the sticky varnished surface of the table. I use 2 fingers to slide the forged transcript toward his resting hands. The paper glides across a ring of spilled water. I expect a frantic denial. I brace myself for the same loud, defensive posturing our father utilized in the kitchen. I expect him to spin a tale of corporate espionage or administrative errors. Lucas does nothing. His shoulders collapse. The remaining air deflates from his chest. He looks at the pixelated university seal. He does not fight back. He raises his hand and flags the bartender. University seal. He does not fight back. He raises his hand and flags the bartender. He does not order a top-shelf scotch to maintain his millionaire persona. He orders a cheap, domestic, draft beer. The bartender drops the pint glass on the table. Foam spills over the rim. Lucas wraps his twitching fingers around the condensation. He takes a long, slow drink. He stares at the amber liquid. He tells me he failed his junior year. His voice is a hollow rasp. He explains how the advanced macroeconomic courses broke him. He describes the panic attacks that left him paralyzed on his dormitory floor during final exams. He could not pass the mathematics. He packed his bags a decade ago and drove back to Macomb County, carrying a secret shame. He lacked the courage to look Thomas in the eye and admit he was just an average, struggling student. He takes another drink. He wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. He leans forward over the sticky wood. He tells me to remember the winter Thomas lost the manufacturing pension. He paints a picture of a broken patriarch. He reminds me how our father sat in the dark living room for weeks, refusing to speak. The financial ruin stripped the dignity from the house. Lucas says he watched the patriarch wither away. He tells me he created Vanguard Freight to act as a psychological defibrillator. He fabricated the corporate registry to inject hope back into the bloodstream of our father. I listen to his twisted confession. The hot anger I carried from the suburbs cools into a profound, tragic realization. Lucas is not a criminal mastermind. He is not a sociopath plotting to destroy his family. He is a weak, terrified boy trapped in the body of an aging man. He built a cardboard empire because he thought it was his duty to save the pride of Thomas. He fed the delusion because the truth was too heavy for either of them to carry. The fake logistics company started as a desperate lie and mutated into a federal crime. I tap the printed collateral disclosures. I ask him about the private equity bridge loan. I ask him how he could leverage the only shelter our parents own. Lucas drops his gaze to the floorboards. He admits the shell companies require constant cash flow to maintain the illusion of operational revenue. He ran out of personal credit 3 years ago. He exhausted his hidden credit cards. The predatory lenders were the only avenue left. He claims he intended to use the $2 million commercial bond to pay off the hard money sharks and secure the deed to the house. He genuinely believed he could untangle the mess before the trap snapped shut. He is drowning in debt. The water is already above his head. He reaches across the table. He grabs my wrist. His skin is cold and clammy. His grip is desperate. He looks at me with pleading, bloodshot eyes. He asks me to process the bond application. He tells me I am the only underwriter who can bypass the verification flags. He begs me to approve the fraudulent file. He says the corporate capital will buy him 6 more months of breathing room. He promises he will figure out a legitimate business pivot if I just give him half a year. He wants me to cover his tracks. The sheer audacity of the request sends a chill down my spine. I look at my brother, begging for salvation in a windowless dive bar. He does not understand the mechanics of the financial system he is trying to manipulate. If I approve the bond, the federal auditors will eventually find the ghost companies. The government always follows the money. He is not asking me for a life raft. He is asking me to tie myself to his sinking ship. If I do what he asks, we will both go to federal prison. Our parents will still lose their home. Everything will burn. I stare at his hand gripping my wrist. I feel a terrible mixture of pity and revulsion. I pull my arm away from his grasp. I gather the forged documents from the damp table. I slide them back into my leather bag. I do not give him an answer. I leave him sitting in the dark corner booth nursing his cheap draft beer. I walk out into the freezing rain. The tragic reality is clear. The choice is no longer about saving my brother. It is about deciding who survives the impending explosion. The drive west across the state feels like navigating through a long, dark tunnel. The freezing rain turns into a steady, monotonous downpour by the time I reach the outskirts of Grand Rapids. My tires hum against the wet asphalt. The heater blows dry air across my cold hands, but the chill remains lodged deep in my bones. The physical sensation of my brother gripping my wrist lingers like a phantom stain. He begged me to tie my pristine corporate record to his sinking ship. He asked me to become a criminal to protect his fragile ego. I pull into the concrete parking structure beneath my office building. I turn off the ignition and sit in the quiet isolation of my sedan. The contrast between the stale dive bar on Woodward Avenue and the gleaming financial district is stark. I spent my entire adult life building a fortress of competence. I studied late into the night. I earned my certifications. I climbed the corporate ladder in a male-dominated industry by being flawless. I constructed a reality far away from the suffocating expectations of my childhood home. Now, the rot of my family has breached the walls of my sanctuary. I grab my leather bag and walk toward the private elevator. I swipe my security badge. The heavy steel doors close and carry me up to the 9th floor. The corporate suite is quiet. Most of the senior staff left for the day. The overhead fluorescent lights hum with a low, sterile frequency. I walk past the empty glass conference rooms and enter my personal office. I drop my wet coat onto the hook behind the door. I sit down in my ergonomic chair. I touch the computer mouse. The dual monitors wake from their sleep state. The digital cue illuminates the dark room. The Vanguard freight file is resting at the very top of my active roster. The $2 million commercial surety bond application pulses on the screen like a digital time bomb. The sheer magnitude of the underwriting dilemma settles over me. It is a crushing, suffocating professional dread. There are only 2 buttons at the bottom of the software interface: approve or deny. Each option carries a catastrophic payload. I look at the green approval icon. I trace the hypothetical timeline of that choice. If I generate a preliminary approval letter, the funds will clear the escrow account within 10 business days. Lucas will take that corporate capital and pay off the predatory hard money lender in Detroit. The lien on the split-level house in Macomb County will be released. Helen and Thomas will keep their shelter. They will host Sunday dinners and praise the visionary genius of their son. They will never know how close they came to the edge of the cliff. But the illusion will only hold for a brief window. Commercial surety bonds of this size are subject to mandatory quarterly audits. Federal banking regulators do not rely on blind faith. They utilize sophisticated algorithms to track vendor payments and verify corporate tax returns. Within 6 months, the federal auditors will scan the Vanguard freight ledgers. They will uncover the ghost companies in Saginaw and the dissolved entities in Lansing. They will trace the circular cash flow. The moment the federal investigators identify the fraud, they will scrutinize the underwriter who approved the bond. They will pull my employee file. They will see that my maiden name matches the managing director of the fraudulent logistics firm. The Department of Justice does not believe in coincidences. They will classify my approval as a deliberate act of corporate espionage. I will be charged as an active accomplice to federal wire fraud. I will be stripped of my commercial license. I will face a grand jury indictment. The career I bled to build will be reduced to a criminal footnote. I will go to federal prison to protect a brother who could not even pass his college courses. I shift my gaze to the red denial icon. I trace the fallout of that choice. If I click reject, I must attach the forged university diploma and the proof of the synthetic shell companies to justify the decision. The Internal Review Board will instantly lock the file. The fraud notification will be transmitted across the financial network. The private equity firm holding the bridge loan will receive the alert. Hard money lenders operate with brutal efficiency. They do not grant extensions to clients caught falsifying their corporate assets. They will trigger the immediate default clause. The 30-day foreclosure clock will start ticking the second the notification lands in their inbox. I picture my father sitting in his worn recliner. I picture the certified mail arriving at the front door. The sheriff will post the eviction notice on the pale blue vinyl siding. Thomas will realize his paid-off fortress is gone. The trauma of losing his auto manufacturing pension will repeat itself. He will be forced to pack his belongings into cardboard boxes and walk out into the street. The patriarch will be shattered. Helen will watch her entire social standing evaporate. The golden child will be exposed as a con artist. The family ecosystem will collapse into a pile of ash. I lean back in my chair and rub my tired eyes. The compliance timeline offers no grace period. The rules governing my license are strict and heavily monitored. The software tracks the duration every application spends in my queue. I have exactly 3 weeks to submit my final underwriting recommendation to the executive board. The bank holds a mandatory risk assessment meeting on the last Friday of the month. The Vanguard Freight dossier must be closed before that meeting convenes. 21 days. That is the exact amount of time I have to choose between my own survival and the shelter of my parents. I open a new window and access the corporate handbook. I search the digital pages looking for a loophole. I look for a gray area in the compliance statutes. I search for a precedent that might allow me to withdraw the application without triggering the fraud alerts. I spend 2 hours reading dense legal jargon. The search yields nothing. There is no convenient administrative exit. The banking industry relies on binary outcomes: risk or no risk, fraud or legitimate enterprise. The isolation of my position is terrifying. I cannot ask a senior colleague for advice. Merely mentioning the forged diploma to another bank employee initiates the mandatory reporting protocol. If I tell my manager about the fake vendors, the decision is taken out of my hands. My manager will press the red button and initiate the raid. I have to carry this secret alone. I look at the framed awards sitting on my office shelf. They are pristine glass plaques recognizing my analytical excellence. They are the trophies my parents never wanted to display on their refrigerator door. My father asked me to hide my high school math championship because it threatened the fragile pride of his son. Now my analytical skills are the only thing standing between his son and a federal penitentiary. The bitter irony tastes like ash. They conditioned me to be invisible. They demanded that I stay quiet and handle the administrative burdens of life without asking for recognition. They built an entire family dynamic around my silent compliance. Now the universe has placed the ultimate administrative burden squarely on my desk. I stand up and walk toward the floor-to-ceiling window. The city lights of Grand Rapids reflect in the rain-slicked streets below. The traffic moves in a steady, organized rhythm. Everyone down there is living a normal life, free from the suffocating weight of a multi-million-dollar lie. I press my forehead against the cool glass. I cannot save everyone. The math does not allow it. If I try to save the house, I lose my freedom. If I save my freedom, they lose the house. The golden child built a trap and handed me the key. I stare at the glowing red and green buttons on my monitor. The dread settles into a cold, unyielding resolve. I am not going to federal prison for a family that erased me. I have to execute my duty. I have to initiate the sequence. The time for deliberation is over. I walk back to my desk and place my hand on the mouse. The choice crystallizes with sudden, chilling clarity. I do not experience a cinematic emotional breakdown. I do not weep over my keyboard or call my mother for a final desperate negotiation. The messy anger I displayed in her kitchen is gone. The raw exhaustion from the dive bar on Woodward Avenue has burned off. I am left with a cold, calculated resolve. I choose the law. I choose the career I built with my own hands. I refuse to become a footnote in a federal indictment to protect a family that treated my existence as an administrative inconvenience. I pull my chair close to the desk. The glow of the dual monitors bathes the dark office in sterile blue light. I am not going to orchestrate a dramatic family dinner revelation. I will not stand over a pot roast and point an accusatory finger at my brother while my parents weep. They already chose their reality. They defended the golden child and screamed at the underwriter. My father told me I lacked vision. My mother told me the world breaks ambitious women. I will let the federal government show them exactly what my ambition looks like. The standard protocol for denying a fraudulent commercial loan requires submitting the file to the internal review board of my bank. That process is fast and sloppy. The internal risk managers would instantly flag the familial connection. They would reject the $2 million surety bond and transmit the fraud notification directly to the private equity lenders in Detroit. The hard money sharks would foreclose on the Macomb County house within 30 days. It would be a localized, violent explosion. I bypass the internal review board. The Bank Secrecy Act provides a different mechanism for underwriters dealing with sophisticated corporate fraud. It is a quiet, deeply embedded legal protocol designed to capture money laundering and shell company operations before they breach the larger financial ecosystem. I open a secure, encrypted browser window. I access the direct federal compliance portal. My fingers move across the mechanical keyboard with practiced precision. I am initiating a formal suspicious activity report. In the banking sector, it is simply known as a SAR. It is the nuclear option of commercial finance. Once a SAR is filed, the document bypasses the local bank executives and routes directly to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. The digital file lands on the desks of federal agents who specialize in dismantling fake empires. I begin compiling the dossier. The process requires meticulous documentation. I am not just rejecting a loan. I am outlining a multi-level criminal enterprise. I upload the executive summary of Vanguard Freight. I attach the color scan of the university diploma. I add a clinical note detailing the pixelated seal and the crooked graduation date. I include a brief factual sentence stating the applicant is my biological brother and he failed his junior year of college 10 years ago. The federal auditors appreciate concise familial context. I move to the financial section of the report. This is where my analytical skills shine. I upload the synthetic revenue ledgers. I map out the fraudulent corporate shell structure my brother built. I attach the State of Michigan business registry queries. I detail the Saginaw address functioning as a retail mailbox store. I document the dissolved limited liability company in Lansing. I trace the circular movement of capital between the ghost vendors and Vanguard Freight. The narrative I construct is devastatingly simple. Lucas is utilizing fictitious vendor contracts to inflate his gross operational revenue. He is leveraging a private bridge loan secured by a residential property to fund the initial underwriting premiums. He intends to use the federally insured commercial surety bond to pay off the predatory lenders and maintain his artificial millionaire lifestyle. He is committing wire fraud. The final section of the suspicious activity report requires a summary of the underlying collateral. I stare at the parcel identification number mapping back to the split-level house with the pale blue vinyl siding, the fortress of my father. I type the address into the federal portal. I list Thomas and Helen as the primary title holders. I state they pledged their paid-off home to secure the fraudulent bridge loan. I review the entire dossier. The logic is flawless. The mathematical proof is undeniable. I do not feel a rush of vengeance. I feel the heavy, somber weight of an underwriter executing her duty. I move my cursor to the Submit button at the bottom of the encrypted page. I press the mouse. The screen refreshes. A confirmation code generates in stark black text. The suspicious activity report is officially lodged in the federal database. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network has received the payload. I return to my internal banking software. I locate the $2 million commercial surety bond application sitting in my active queue. I do not click Approve. I do not click Deny. The federal protocol requires the financial institution to halt all internal processing while the investigation is active. I change the status of the Vanguard freight file to a secure holding state. I lock the bond application in a pending administrative review status. To my manager, the file looks like a complex corporate loan undergoing standard due diligence. To Lucas, the pending status looks like a temporary bureaucratic delay. He will assume I am covering for him. He will think the golden child magic is working and I am quietly fixing his paperwork in the background. The truth is locked inside the federal servers. The federal process is not instantaneous. This is not a local police matter where squad cars show up the next morning. The Department of Justice operates with a slow crushing inevitably. Federal investigations take months. They subpoena bank records. They track the offshore wires. They build airtight cases before they ever knock on a front door. I log out of the corporate network. I shut down the monitors. The office plunges into total darkness. The rain continues to beat against the floor-to-ceiling window. I stand up and retrieve my wool coat. I have initiated the sequence. The execution is entirely out of my hands. I walk to the elevator. The descent to the parking garage is quiet. I drive my sedan out into the wet city streets. The immediate crisis is over, but the true psychological torture is just beginning. I have to live with the knowledge of the impending raid. I have to interact with the people whose lives I just handed over to the federal government. I begin the waiting game. The clock is ticking toward a destruction they cannot see coming. I merge onto the dark highway heading toward my empty apartment. The silence is absolute. 90 days is a specific kind of psychological torture. The calendar pages turn from the freezing rain of late April into the humid, sweltering heat of a Michigan July. Every morning I wake up and check the local news portals. I look for federal indictments. I scan for logistical fraud busts in the Metro Detroit area. I find nothing. The Department of Justice operates in absolute silence until they are ready to strike. The suspicious activity report is a ticking clock hidden behind a bureaucratic curtain. To maintain the illusion, I must maintain my routine. I have to play the role of the dutiful daughter. I drive to Macomb County for Sunday dinners. The split-level house with the pale blue vinyl siding looks identical. The lawn is green. The driveway is clear of snow. Inside the walls, the delusion is stronger than ever. I sit at the round oak table in the kitchen. Helen serves a dry roast beef. She places the largest portion on the plate of my brother. Lucas wears a crisp polo shirt. He acts like a corporate visionary on the verge of a multi-million-dollar breakthrough. He assumes my pending status on his bond application is a protective maneuver. He thinks I am shielding him from the underwriting review board. He flashes a charming smile and talks about expanding his non-existent freight fleet into Ohio. Thomas nods along with every fabricated word. The patriarch drinks his domestic beer and beams with unearned pride. He looks at me and asks if my little paperwork job is keeping me busy. The condescension in his voice is a physical weight. He genuinely believes his son is a titan of industry, and I am just a clerical drone. He has no idea the clerical drone handed his entire financial existence over to the federal government. I look at the dry meat on my plate. I grip my fork. Helen stands near the oven holding a gravy boat. She looks at Lucas and praises his relentless ambition. She tells him he is the anchor of this family. She says she always knew he would restore the wealth Thomas lost when the auto plant stripped his pension. A sudden, violent pressure builds in my skull. I cannot listen to the hollow praise for another second. The hypocrisy is a physical sickness in my gut. I do not deliver a sharp intellectual rebuttal. I do not point out the impending federal raid. I press my teeth together. I bite down on the soft flesh inside my own cheek. I bite down so hard the metallic taste of copper floods my mouth. It is a desperate physical act to stop myself from screaming at my mother. I drop my silverware onto the ceramic plate. The loud clatter halts the conversation. Thomas furrows his brow. Helen asks if the meat is too tough. I do not offer a polite excuse. I do not claim I have a headache or a sudden work emergency. I stand up. My chair scrapes loudly against the linoleum. I turn my back on the patriarch. I walk out of the kitchen. I march down the hallway, past the framed, forged diploma, and walk out the front door. I leave them sitting in their fragile mirage. I drive back to Grand Rapids with the taste of blood in my mouth. The secret gnaws at the lining of my stomach. I am an underwriter. I deal in risk mitigation and statistical probabilities. I am trained to remove emotion from the equation. But the human element is messy and chaotic. Lucas is a fraud and a parasite. He leveraged the shelter of our parents to fund a ghost company. I despise his weakness. I hate the lies he forced me to navigate. Yet he is still my brother. I remember him teaching me how to ride a bicycle in the alley behind our first house. I remember him sharing his Halloween candy when I dropped my plastic bucket in a puddle. Those fragmented memories fight against the cold reality of the synthetic ledgers. The duality of my hatred and my familial bond tears me apart. The internal conflict reaches a breaking point during a mundane Tuesday evening. I am navigating the aisles of a Meijer supermarket in Grand Rapids. The bright fluorescent lights hum above the fresh produce section. I am pushing a metal shopping cart with a squeaking front wheel. I am holding a plastic basket of strawberries. A man in a dark utility jacket walks past me, speaking into a cell phone. He mentions a financial audit. It is a random, disconnected phrase. It has nothing to do with commercial surety bonds or logistics startups. But the human brain is a fragile instrument under prolonged stress. The word audit triggers a catastrophic physiological response. My chest seizes. The air in the grocery store suddenly feels too thick to breathe. My vision narrows into a dark tunnel. I drop the plastic basket. The strawberries spill across the polished concrete floor. I abandon my shopping cart. I stumble away from the produce aisle. I push through the swinging doors of the public restroom near the pharmacy counter. The restroom is empty. I collapse against the cold ceramic wall. My knees buckle. I slide down until I am sitting on the hard tile floor. I draw my knees to my chest. I am hyperventilating. The pristine corporate executive is gone. I am a terrified 34-year-old woman suffocating under the weight of her own actions. A vivid, horrifying image flashes through my mind. I picture the federal agents arriving at the split-level house. I see the unmarked sedans pulling into the driveway. I see men wearing tactical vests kicking open the white enamel front door. I picture them dragging Lucas out of the living room in handcuffs. I see Helen standing on the front porch, screaming in terror as the government dismantles her golden child. I am the architect of that impending nightmare. I pulled the trigger. I initiated the suspicious activity report. I am the reason my mother will watch her son face a grand jury indictment. The guilt is a crushing physical force. I press my palms against the cold floor tiles, trying to ground myself in reality. I try to focus on the breathing techniques I read about in corporate wellness pamphlets. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4. The technique fails. I sit in the grocery store bathroom and weep. I cry for the brother who was too weak to admit his failures. I cry for the mother who built a shrine to an illusion. I cry for the father who traded his home for a lie. I am mourning a family that is technically still breathing, but legally already dead. I spend 20 minutes on the bathroom floor. Eventually, the panic subsides into a hollow, numb exhaustion. The adrenaline burns out, leaving a cold residue in my veins. I stand up on shaking legs. I wash my face in the stainless steel sink. I avoid my own reflection in the mirror. I walk out of the grocery store, leaving the spilled strawberries on the floor. I drive back to my empty apartment. The 90-day threshold arrives. It is a warm morning in late July. I sit at my desk on the 9th floor of the glass building. The sky outside is a brilliant, clear blue. I open my secure banking portal. I navigate to my active queue. I check the status of the Vanguard Freight bond application. The file is no longer in a pending administrative hold. The status indicator has changed overnight. The icon is solid red. The text beside it reads, Federal Restraint Active. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network completed their silent investigation. The waiting period is officially over. The invisible trap I set 3 months ago is springing shut. I stare at the red text, knowing the shockwave is already traveling toward Macomb County. The destruction is no longer a probability. It is an immediate, physical reality. The calendar flips to a humid Tuesday morning in late July. The 90-day window officially expires. The machinery of the federal government activates without warning or fanfare. The Department of Justice does not execute white-collar fraud raids with screaming sirens or tactical battering rams. They operate with a chilling, clinical efficiency. The shock and awe of a financial takedown is entirely psychological. The Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division moves on the Vanguard Freight office space. Lucas leases a small suite in a generic commercial park near Troy. It is a hollow facade. The rooms are largely empty of actual freight operations. They exist to provide a physical address for his elaborate shell game. He sits behind a rented mahogany desk. He wears a tailored suit and stares at dual monitors displaying synthetic revenue projections. He is waiting for my phone call to confirm his $2 million surety bond is approved. He believes the Golden Child immunity will protect him forever. He is staring at a mirage. 2 plainclothes agents walk through his glass door at 9 in the morning. They wear conservative business attire. They carry briefcases. They do not raise their voices. They identify themselves as federal investigators and present a federal warrant signed by a grand jury judge. They inform him his commercial accounts are frozen pending a comprehensive review of his offshore vendor transactions. The illusion shatters instantly. The agents do not ask for his permission. They begin seizing his digital ledgers and cloning the hard drives of his servers. They dismantle the fake logistics company with surgical precision. They are searching for the phantom automotive suppliers in Saginaw and the dissolved limited liability entities in Lansing. They possess the exact roadmap I provided in my suspicious activity report. Lucas watches his entire identity evaporate in real time. The arrogant smirk melts off his face. The tailored suit suddenly looks absurd on a man facing a multi-level fraud indictment. He is stripped of his visionary entrepreneur persona. He is reduced to a terrified debtor, watching the federal government confiscate his lies. He realizes the commercial surety bond is dead. The capital he desperately needed to pay off the predatory bridge loan will never arrive. Back in Grand Rapids, the banking software updates simultaneously with the federal raid. The $2 million application flashes on my monitor. The status indicator blinks rapidly. The system formally rejects the bond based on the federal restraint order. An automated notification fires off across the financial network. The rejection letter states the applicant is under active investigation for wire fraud and material misrepresentation of corporate assets. The notification hits the inbox of the private equity firm in Detroit. The hard money lenders holding the lien on the Macomb County house receive the alert. Their risk assessment algorithms trigger the default protocols immediately. The predatory lenders do not call my brother to negotiate. They initiate the foreclosure process on the split-level house with the pale blue vinyl siding. The dominoes fall in rapid succession. Lucas is paralyzed behind his rented desk. He watches the agents box up his external hard drives. He reaches for his personal cell phone. He does not call his corporate attorney. He cannot afford a criminal defense lawyer because he spent his remaining cash maintaining his fake millionaire lifestyle. He defaults to his oldest coping mechanism. He calls his enabler. He dials the number of our father. Thomas is sitting in his worn recliner in Macomb County drinking his morning coffee. He is watching a local news broadcast. He answers the phone expecting an update on the massive commercial expansion of Vanguard Freight. He expects to hear his son talk about securing new trucking routes. Instead, he hears a frantic, broken voice. Lucas is hyperventilating on the other end of the line. The panic is absolute. He tells Thomas the federal agents are tearing apart his office. He confesses the $2 million bond was rejected. He admits the logistics company is insolvent. He babbles incoherently about frozen bank accounts and seized ledgers. The patriarch cannot process the information. His brain rejects the collapse of his primary coping mechanism. Thomas tries to calm his son down. He assures Lucas it is a simple administrative misunderstanding. He tells him the government is likely auditing a competitor and dragging Vanguard Freight into the crossfire. He promises to hire an accountant to clear up the paperwork. He leans heavily on the delusion he cultivated since the auto plant stripped his pension. Lucas cannot maintain the lie anymore. The presence of the federal agents in his office forces the truth out of his throat. He tells Thomas the business is fake. He confesses there are no exclusive vendor contracts. He admits he utilized ghost companies to inflate his revenue. He tells his father the entire enterprise is a shell game designed to secure the bridge loan. The admission hits the family ecosystem like a shockwave. Thomas grips his coffee mug until his knuckles turn white. He asks his son what he means by fake business. He asks about the university degree hanging in the hallway. He demands to know if the graduation was a lie. Lucas sobs into the phone. He confesses he failed his junior year 10 years ago. He admits he never walked across a stage. The framed diploma is a color scan he purchased online. The silence on the line is deafening. The reality of the forgery crushes the patriarch. The shrine on the refrigerator door was built for a phantom. The golden child is a convicted failure. Thomas stares at the pale blue vinyl walls of his living room. The fortress he paid off with 30 years of manual labor is suddenly a precarious liability. He asks the ultimate, devastating question. He asks Lucas about the bridge loan. He asks if the private equity firm knows the logistics company is fraudulent. Lucas cannot lie. He confirms the federal rejection triggered a default notice to the hard money lenders. He tells his father the predatory investors are coming for the house. The coffee mug slips from the hand of my father. It shatters against the hardwood floor. The hot liquid splatters across the baseboards. Helen rushes into the living room from the kitchen. She sees the broken ceramic and the pale, terrified face of her husband. She asks what happened. Thomas drops the phone. It clatters next to the spilled coffee. He looks at his wife with hollow, dead eyes. He tells her they lost everything. He tells Helen the golden boy is facing a federal indictment. He tells her the degree in the hallway is a forgery. He tells her the house is gone. The entire structure of their worldview disintegrates in a matter of seconds. The pedestal they built for their son collapses into a pile of criminal ash. The trauma of the lost pension is no longer a distant memory. It is a current, active nightmare they invited into their own home. The execution of the delusion is total. The digital ping from the federal database travels across the financial network with ruthless speed. It reaches the private equity firm in Detroit before the afternoon sun reaches its peak. High-risk lenders do not operate with grace periods or empathetic customer service representatives. They rely on automated risk assessment algorithms and ironclad contracts. The moment the fraud notification attaches itself to the Vanguard freight profile, the algorithmic threshold is breached. The system flags the bridge loan. The corporate attorneys for the private lender review the federal restraint order and initiate their predetermined protocol. They trigger the default clause on the Macomb County house. The mechanism is devoid of human emotion. It is a simple legal cascade. Lucas promised them a $2 million commercial payout. The federal government seized his accounts and classified his business as a criminal enterprise. The private lender knows the cash will never arrive. They immediately pivot to their secondary method of recovery. They move to seize the physical collateral. 3 days after the raid, a mail carrier walks up the concrete path to the split-level house. The summer heat radiates off the pavement. The carrier rings the doorbell and holds a green, certified mail slip. Thomas answers the door. He wears his faded flannel shirt. His arthritis flares in his knuckles as he takes the pen and signs his name on the dotted line. He accepts the thick manila envelope. The return address belongs to a prominent real estate litigation firm in Detroit. Thomas walks back into the living room and sits in his worn fabric recliner. The chair is molded to the exact shape of his body. He spent decades resting in this spot after grueling shifts on the automotive assembly line. He opens the envelope with a dull kitchen knife. He unfolds the crisp white pages. The legal jargon is dense, but the intent is unmistakable. It is a formal notice of default and intent to foreclose. The document outlines the terms of the bridge loan he co-signed for his son. It states that, due to material misrepresentation of corporate assets, the principal balance is due immediately. Thomas does not possess the capital to satisfy the debt. The letter serves as a 30-day notice to vacate the premises. The private equity firm is seizing the property to liquidate the asset. Thomas drops the papers onto his lap. The patriarch stares at the blank wall across the room. He does not yell. He does not throw his coffee mug or kick the furniture. A profound, terrifying paralysis overtakes his nervous system. 15 years ago, he opened a very similar envelope. That letter came from a corporate restructuring board informing him his manufacturing pension was dissolved. He gave 30 years of his physical health to an assembly line, only to watch rich men erase his retirement. He survived that initial trauma by transferring his hope onto his son. He convinced himself that Lucas would build a new legacy to replace the stolen pension. He traded the security of his paid-off fortress for the illusion of a dynasty. Now he sits in the same chair, facing an identical ruin. But this time, the architect of his destruction is not a faceless corporate executive. The thief is his own blood. The betrayal hollows out his chest, the golden child stripped away his final dignity. Helen hears the silence in the living room. She walks out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She sees the legal documents resting on the lap of her husband. She sees the catatonic stare fixed on his pale face. She does not need to read the fine print. She knows the consequences of the federal raid have finally arrived at their doorstep. She turns away from the recliner. She wanders into the narrow hallway. The ticking of the brass grandfather clock sounds like a hammer striking an anvil. She stops in front of the framed university diploma. The fake credential hangs at eye level. She reaches out with trembling fingers. She touches the cool glass covering the pixelated seal. Her entire worldview disintegrates in the dim light of the corridor. She flashes back to her childhood in Escanaba. She remembers the bitter winters in the Upper Peninsula. She remembers the smell of the wood-burning stove where her father incinerated her college brochures. She spent her whole life trying to outrun the oppressive sexism of that iron ore dock worker. She poured all her thwarted ambition into Lucas. She built a protective shield around him and demanded the universe recognize his greatness. She realizes her maternal protection was a lethal weapon. She enabled a weak boy until he mutated into a federal criminal. She ignored my perfect report cards to spare his feelings. She punished my competence to reward his mediocrity. She traded a brilliant, capable daughter for a son who burned down her house. Helen takes the wooden frame off the wall. She does not throw it in anger. She simply lets it slip from her hands. The frame hits the hardwood floor. The glass shatters into jagged pieces. The sound snaps Thomas out of his trance for a brief second, but he does not rise from his chair. Helen kneels on the floor. She picks up the cheap piece of paper printed from a generic website. She crumples the fake degree in her fist. She sits among the broken glass and weeps for the life she threw away. The family ecosystem is entirely broken. The dynamic that sustained them for 3 decades is dead. Lucas does not call to offer comfort. He is unreachable. He spends his days sitting in the sterile office of a federal public defender. The grand jury indictment is imminent. The prosecutors from the Department of Justice do not offer lenient plea deals to operators of sophisticated shell companies. They are preparing to charge him with multiple counts of wire fraud and bank fraud. He is facing a mandatory minimum sentence in a federal penitentiary. He cannot save his parents. He cannot even save himself. The 30-day countdown begins. The house falls into a state of tragic, silent mourning. Cardboard moving boxes begin to appear in the dining room. Helen wraps her dishes in old newspaper. Thomas packs his tools into plastic crates. They move with the slow, shuffling gait of ghosts. They do not speak about the future because they do not possess one. They are checking the prices of cramped rental apartments in forgotten industrial suburbs. They are calculating how many months they can survive on meager Social Security checks before they become destitute. I observe the collapse from my office in Grand Rapids. I do not visit the house. I do not call to offer empty platitudes. The anger I felt in their kitchen has burned away, leaving a solemn, heavy sorrow. I executed my duty as a commercial underwriter. I protected the financial system from a predator. I protected my own license and my freedom. The federal government handled the rest. But the mathematical reality of their situation gnaws at my conscience. I look at the legal framework of the foreclosure. The private equity firm in Detroit does not want to manage a residential property. Hard money lenders despise the slow process of real estate auctions and property maintenance. They prefer liquid capital. They want to offload the defaulted bridge loan and clear their books. A new path begins to form in my mind. It is a narrow, dangerous avenue navigating through the wreckage of the fraud. I despise the lies my parents told. I resent the favoritism that defined my childhood. But I cannot let the patriarch die in poverty. I cannot let my mother freeze in a substandard rental unit. The golden child destroyed their shelter. The invisible daughter has to decide what happens to the ashes. I reach for my phone and dial the number of a private real estate attorney. The time for silent observation is over. The final transaction is about to begin. The collapse of their reality is absolute, but I cannot let the aftermath destroy their physical survival. The anger I carried for 34 years finally dissipates. It burns out, leaving a cool, barren landscape in my mind. I am not driven by a need for vengeance. The federal government handled the retribution. I am driven by an analytical moral code. I despise the delusion of my parents. I resent the pedestal they built for my brother, but I refuse to watch the patriarch freeze in a subsidized apartment. I will not let Thomas die in poverty because he trusted a con artist. I pull the digital file for the private equity firm holding the defaulted bridge loan. Hard money lenders in Detroit are ruthless, but they are highly predictable. They despise holding residential real estate. Foreclosure proceedings are slow. Evictions require messy legal maneuvers, and property maintenance drains their liquid capital. They want to offload the bad debt and clear their balance sheets quickly. They prefer a reduced lump sum over a prolonged auction process. I understand the mechanics of distressed assets. I am going to buy the ruin of my family. I do not handle the transaction personally. I cannot risk my name appearing on the transfer documents while the federal investigation against Lucas is still active. The optics of a commercial underwriter purchasing the collateral of her indicted sibling would trigger an entirely new wave of compliance audits. I need absolute anonymity. I contact a senior real estate attorney operating out of a boutique firm in Grand Rapids. His name is Marcus. He specializes in corporate acquisitions and shielded wealth transfers. I sit in his mahogany-paneled office and slide a thick manila folder across his desk. I outline the parameters of the operation. I tell him about the defaulted bridge loan in Macomb County. I explain that the private equity lender is preparing to evict an elderly couple. I instruct him to intercept the foreclosure. Marcus reviews the paperwork. He adjusts his glasses and looks at me with clinical curiosity. He understands I am not buying a lucrative investment property. I am executing a rescue mission hidden inside a corporate buyout. I instruct him to establish a blind trust. I name the entity the Superior Holdings Trust. It is a quiet nod to the Upper Peninsula, where my mother learned to bury her ambition. The legal architecture of the trust ensures my identity remains completely shielded from the public registry and the private lenders. I fund the trust using my own accumulated wealth. My parents assumed my corporate career consisted of pushing papers for a modest salary. They never bothered to ask about my compensation structure. A senior commercial underwriter in the Midwest earned significant annual performance bonuses. While Lucas burned through his credit cards to maintain the illusion of success, I quietly invested my bonuses into high-yield municipal bonds. I possess the liquidity to solve the crisis. I authorize the transfer of funds. Marcus initiates the aggressive negotiation phase. The process is brutal and exhausting. The private equity firm tries to inflate the buyout price. They claim the Macomb County property holds significant market value despite the impending foreclosure. Marcus counters their bluff with flawless legal aggression. He highlights the structural depreciation of the split-level house. He points out the costly delays associated with a contested eviction. He forces them into a mathematical corner. They agree to sell the defaulted debt note for 80 cents on the dollar. The transaction takes 3 weeks to clear the escrow accounts. I sit in my glass office and monitor the progress while the August heat bakes the city. I review international freight portfolios and sign off on legitimate corporate bonds while Marcus finalizes the paperwork. The duality of my existence is profound. During the day, I protect a regional bank from financial predators. At night, I orchestrate the secret acquisition of my childhood home. The final confirmation email arrives on a Thursday afternoon. The digital signature of the private lender is attached to the transfer deed. The bridge loan is officially satisfied. The foreclosure proceedings initiated by the hard money sharks are legally terminated. The Superior Holdings Trust is now the sole proprietor of the physical asset. I lean back in my ergonomic chair and stare at the PDF document. The realization hits me with immense gravity. I am the invisible daughter who hid her high school math trophy under a bed. I am the woman whose corporate promotions were ignored so her brother could shine. Now I hold the deed to their fortress. I own the split-level house with the pale blue vinyl siding. The very ground my father walks on belongs to the child he dismissed. The irony is not a source of gloating joy. It is a somber, heavy responsibility. I have executed a strategic mercy. I secured their physical shelter from the jaws of a predatory lender. But purchasing the debt note does not erase the psychological rot inside the house. Lucas is still sitting on their sofa awaiting his federal arraignment. Thomas and Helen are still packing their belongings into cardboard boxes, believing they are bound for the streets. They assume the silence from the private lender is merely the quiet before the final storm. They are waiting for the sheriff to arrive and change the locks. They have no idea the executioner was replaced by a benefactor. I cannot let them suffer the terror of impending homelessness for another day. I cannot allow the golden child to continue draining the remaining emotional reserves of my parents. The rescue mission requires a final, brutal confrontation. I print the revised lease agreement Marcus drafted for the blind trust. The document stipulates the exact terms of their continued residency. I place the crisp, white papers into a leather portfolio. I lock my computer terminal and grab my keys. I walk out of the corporate suite and take the elevator down to the parking garage. The drive to Macomb County is no longer a descent into anxiety. It is the march of an owner surveying her property. The legal transfer is complete, but the emotional eviction is just beginning. I am going to secure the perimeter of my new asset. I am going to remove the parasite from the premises. The late August heat radiates from the asphalt as I turn onto the quiet cul-de-sac. The pale blue vinyl siding of the split-level house looks faded under the glaring sun. The lawn is usually trimmed with obsessive precision. Today, the grass is overgrown and patchy. Weeds sprout from the edged garden beds. The visible neglect is the physical manifestation of a broken patriarch. Tomas stopped caring about the exterior of the fortress the moment he believed it was lost. I park my sedan in the driveway. The rusted Honda Civic belonging to Lucas is parked haphazardly near the garage. The golden child retreated to his childhood bedroom after the federal raid. He hides behind the closed blinds while he awaits his arraignment. I step out of the air-conditioned car. The humidity wraps around me like a damp towel. I hold the leather portfolio containing the revised lease agreement. I do not carry the frantic anger of my previous visit. I move with a somber, heavy authority. I am the legal owner of this parcel of land. I walk up the concrete path. I do not use my key. I press the doorbell and wait. The chime echoes through the silent house. Helen opens the door. The sight of her steals the breath from my lungs. The matriarch looks hollow. She wears a faded housecoat over a simple cotton dress. Her hair is unstyled. The proud suburban facade she maintained for 3 decades is entirely gone. She sees me standing on the porch, and her eyes fill with immediate tears. She thinks I am here to witness their final humiliation. I step over the threshold into the entryway. The space where the forged university diploma used to hang is bare. A lighter patch of floral wallpaper marks the exact dimensions of the shattered lie. The hallway smells of stale dust and packing tape. I walk past my mother into the living room. The physical geography of my youth is dismantled. Cardboard boxes are stacked against the walls. The china cabinets are empty. The family photographs are packed away. Thomas sits in his worn fabric recliner, holding a roll of packing tape. He looks like a ghost haunting his own life. The trauma of the lost auto manufacturing pension is written across his slumped shoulders. He is preparing to move his wife into a cramped, subsidized rental unit in a forgotten industrial suburb. He believes the predatory lenders are coming to seize the keys tomorrow morning. Lucas sits on the floral sofa across from the recliner. He wears sweatpants and a stained gray t-shirt. He is mindlessly scrolling through a cell phone. The man who faked a logistics empire to secure a $2 million commercial bond looks like a sullen teenager. He is avoiding the reality of his impending federal indictment by staring at a screen. He expects his elderly parents to absorb the full impact of his criminal failure while he hides on their furniture. Thomas looks up from the packing tape. He sees me holding the leather portfolio. His jaw tightens. He assumes I came to gloat. He expects a self-righteous lecture about the consequences of bank fraud. He braces himself for the final blow. I do not offer a lecture. I walk over to the recliner. I open the portfolio and extract the crisp white legal document. I hold the revised lease agreement out toward my father. He does not take the paper. He stares at the bold black text. I keep my voice level and calm. I tell him the private equity firm in Detroit no longer holds the defaulted bridge loan. I explain that the hard money lenders sold the debt note to a private blind trust. I tell him the Superior Holdings Trust intercepted the foreclosure proceedings. The threat of immediate eviction is legally terminated. Thomas blinks slowly. His exhausted brain struggles to process the sudden shift in his reality. He asks me what a blind trust means for his shelter. He asks if the new corporate owners are going to raise the rent or demolish the property. Helen steps into the living room behind me. She clutches her hands together, listening to the unbelievable news. The patriarch looks at me with a desperate, fearful hope. He asks, who controls the trust? I do not lower my gaze. I look directly into the eyes of the man who asked me to hide my high school math trophy. I tell him I control the trust. I state the fact without pride or malice. I explain that I utilized my corporate bonuses to purchase the defaulted debt. I tell him I am the sole proprietor of the physical asset. I own the split-level house. The silence in the living room is profound. The only sound is the hum of the central air conditioning unit. Thomas stares at me. His mouth opens slightly, but no words come out. The patriarch realizes the daughter he dismissed as an administrative clerk just purchased his survival with cash. The golden child stripped away his dignity, and the invisible daughter bought it back. The lifelong hierarchy of the family shatters into a million irreparable pieces. Helen lets out a soft, jagged sob. She presses her hands to her mouth. She looks at the bare wall in the hallway and then looks back at me. She finally understands the staggering cost of her toxic protection. She ignored the competence that just saved her from the streets. She weeps for the blind cruelty of her past. I place the revised lease agreement on the armrest of the recliner. I outline the terms of the arrangement. I tell Thomas he and Helen can live in this house rent-free for the rest of their natural lives. I will cover the property taxes and the structural maintenance. I tell him he does not have to pack another box. The fortress is secure. Thomas reaches out with trembling fingers. He touches the crisp white paper. He looks up at me. A single tear tracks down his weathered cheek. He does not offer a grand cinematic apology. He does not possess the emotional vocabulary to repair 34 years of neglect in a single afternoon. He simply bows his head. The surrender of the patriarch is absolute. He accepts the charity of the child he failed. I turn my attention away from the recliner. I pivot toward the floral sofa. Lucas is no longer scrolling on his cell phone. The golden boy is staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. He heard every word of the legal transfer. He realizes the protective shield of his parents is completely gone. He is sitting on furniture owned by the underwriter who exposed his fake empire. I look at my brother. I do not feel pity. I do not feel the agonizing internal conflict that paralyzed me in the grocery store bathroom 90 days ago. The federal prosecutors will handle the wire fraud charges and the synthetic revenue ledgers. I am only concerned with the perimeter of my property. I address him with the cold authority of a landlord. I tell Lucas the rent-free lease agreement applies exclusively to Thomas and Helen. I state clearly that the blind trust does not subsidize federal criminals. I tell him his presence is a toxic liability to the structural integrity of the household. He ruined their retirement. He dragged the family name through a grand jury investigation. I refuse to let him drain the final years of their lives hiding from his own consequences. Lucas opens his mouth to protest. He looks toward Thomas, expecting the patriarch to rise up and defend him. He expects the old rules to apply. He assumes his father will demand I show mercy to the heir of the family. Thomas does not move. The old man keeps his head bowed, staring at the lease agreement. The enabler is permanently deactivated. I look at my watch. I tell Lucas he has exactly 1 hour to pack his belongings. I tell him to put his clothes into a garbage bag and get off my property. I warn him that if his rusted car is still in the driveway in 60 minutes, I will call the local police and have him removed for trespassing. The eviction is non-negotiable. The golden child is officially banished from the fortress. The brass grandfather clock in the hallway ticks away the 60 minutes. I sit on the edge of the dining room chair and wait. I do not look at my phone. I do not offer small talk to fill the heavy air. 60 minutes is a grueling duration when a family structure is actively expiring. I listen to the heavy footsteps on the second floor. Lucas is moving through his childhood bedroom. He is pulling clothes from the closet he used since high school. The golden boy is packing his life into black plastic garbage bags. The sound of rustling plastic echoes down the stairwell. Thomas remains anchored in his worn fabric recliner. The patriarch stares at the revised lease agreement resting on his lap. He traces the signature line with his thumb. He does not yell at me to show mercy to his son. The instinct to defend the fraud is gone. He traded his paternal pride for a guaranteed roof over his head. Helen stands near the entryway. She is clutching the edges of her faded housecoat. She watches the bottom of the staircase. The maternal instinct to shield her boy from the harsh consequences of the world fights a losing battle against the reality of her near eviction. She knows I hold the deed to the property. She knows asserting her authority will cost her the very floor she is standing on. The heavy footsteps reach the landing. Lucas appears in the hallway. He drags 2 large black bags behind him. The thin plastic stretches over the sharp edges of his expensive shoes. He wears a heavy coat. The humid August heat broke days ago, giving way to an early, brutal cold front. He walks toward the front door, preparing to step out into the biting chill of a premature Michigan winter. He stops in front of our mother. He drops the bags on the hardwood floor. He looks at Helen with the familiar, desperate expression he perfected over 3 decades. He is waiting for the matriarch to intervene. He expects her to throw her arms around him and demand I let him stay in the basement. He expects her to rewrite the narrative one final time. Helen looks at her son. She looks at the dark circles under his eyes and the weak slump of his shoulders. She does not reach out to embrace him. She does not offer a tearful defense. She simply steps back and clears a path to the door. The visual surrender is profound. She finally sees the reality of her choices. She realizes her relentless protection stunted his ability to survive in the real world. She sees the con artist she nurtured. She chooses her own physical survival over his continued comfort. Lucas realizes the shield is permanently lowered. The color drains from his face. He picks up the plastic bags. He does not say goodbye. He opens the white enamel door and walks out onto the concrete porch. The heavy door shuts behind him. The lock clicks into place. I stand up from the dining chair. I button my wool coat. I walk over to the recliner where Thomas is sitting. I look down at the broken patriarch. I tell him the property taxes are paid through the end of the fiscal year. I tell him the blind trust expects him to maintain the lawn and keep the gutters clear. He nods slowly. He does not look up. I leave him sitting in the quiet wreckage of his dynasty. I walk past Helen in the entryway. I do not offer a comforting hug. We are bound by a legal lease agreement now. The emotional ties were severed the day she framed a forged diploma instead of celebrating my legitimate victories. I step out the front door and walk down the driveway. The rusted car of my brother is already gone. He is driving toward a cheap motel to wait for his grand jury arraignment. I get into my sedan. I turn the key and the engine purrs to life. I merge onto the street and leave the quiet cul-de-sac behind. I navigate toward the highway heading back to Grand Rapids. The drive across the state offers a profound, expansive peace. I saved their shelter, but I destroyed their delusion. They will live the rest of their natural lives inside a fortress owned by the daughter they ignored. The silence inside my car is beautiful. I do not turn on the radio. I listen to the hum of the tires against the pavement. The lifelong anxiety that dictated my youth is gone. I look at the dark landscape rolling past my window, and I process the closure. Surviving a toxic family ecosystem requires a clinical approach to human behavior. I carry 5 distinct lessons from the ashes of Macomb County. First, financial boundaries are the ultimate emotional boundaries. You cannot untangle a toxic relationship while your resources are mingled with their bad decisions. Controlling the math gives you the power to control the narrative. Second, you cannot cure a delusion by participating in it. Enablers will always demand you lower your standards to protect the fragile ego of a failure. Refusing to play along is not a cruel act. It is the only way to stop the spread of the disease. Third true power is inherently quiet. Loud boasts and synthetic ledgers are the tools of terrified predators. The most dangerous person in the room is the one who observes the flaws and documents the data without raising their voice. Competence does not need a billboard. Fourth, saving people does not mean you have to endure them. You can show strategic mercy from a distance. You can pay a debt or secure a roof without sitting at the dinner table and swallowing their insults. Charity does not require your continued emotional submission. Fifth, unacknowledged success remains a success. You do not need a magnet on a refrigerator door to validate your excellence. The approval of people who worship illusions holds zero currency in the real world. You build your own fortress, brick by brick. I pull into my parking garage in Grand Rapids. I turn off the ignition. The journey is over. Have you ever had to save the people who hurt you? Subscribe to Maya Tells Stories and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. I sit by the floor-to-ceiling window in my Grand Rapids apartment and watch the winter snow cover the city streets. The legal paperwork for the blind trust rests safely in a locked file cabinet. The federal prosecutors secured their conviction. Lucas is currently serving a mandatory minimum sentence in a federal penitentiary for commercial wire fraud. Thomas and Helen live a quiet, isolated life inside the Macomb County house. They never call my phone, and I never visit their property. The silence between us is the ultimate price of their physical survival. Looking back at the financial slaughterhouse my brother built and the delusion my parents fiercely defended, I carry 5 distinct lessons with me every single day. First, unacknowledged success remains a profound success. You do not need a magnet on a refrigerator door to validate your excellence. The approval of people who worship illusions holds zero currency in the actual corporate world. You build your own fortress, brick by brick, and you let your quiet competence speak for itself. Second, you cannot cure a deep delusion by participating in the charade. Enablers will always demand you lower your professional standards to protect the fragile ego of a failure. Refusing to play along with their fantasy is not a cruel act. It is the only logical way to stop the spread of a toxic emotional disease. Third, financial boundaries are the ultimate emotional boundaries. You cannot untangle a poisonous family relationship while your resources are mingled with their bad decisions. Controlling the mathematics gives you the power to control the entire narrative. When you hold the legal deed, you hold the absolute authority. Fourth, saving people does not mean you have to endure their presence. You can show strategic mercy from a safe geographical distance. You can pay a defaulted debt or secure a physical roof without sitting at a Sunday dinner table and swallowing their bitter insults. True charity does not require your continued emotional submission. Fifth, relentless protection creates helpless, dangerous predators. Shielding a person from the natural consequences of their own mediocrity does not make them strong. It turns them into a parasite willing to sacrifice their own parents to survive. The golden child pedestal is actually a lifelong prison. I survived the fire of their neglect and built a peaceful empire from the ashes. Thank you for listening to my personal journey. If you found value in my truth, I earnestly ask you to please subscribe to Maya Tells Stories. Your subscription is deeply appreciated because it helps maintain this platform and allows Maya the Storyteller to continue developing and sharing other fascinating stories with the world. Please share this video with someone who might be struggling with their own toxic family dynamic.